I'll do like an intro first.
Okay.
And good morning, good evening, wherever you may find yourself. Welcome to Coffee Code and Chat. And I'm pretty excited about today's show because I love talking to real people who are actually in the trenches, going through the process of learning to code, looking to switch careers. And so I'm really excited for today's guest. I'm going to bring her on in just a moment. Her name is Karen. But if you're new and you're just joining, welcome. Glad to have you here on the Saturday morning stream. We talk about everything dev related and anything that's related to getting hired, learning to code and all that great, exciting stuff. So let me go ahead and bring in Karen and we'll just jump right into it. Hey, Karen, welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So how are you today? How's everything? How's your Thanksgiving?
Oh, it was really good. I went to my sister's and they cooked such good food and it was great. Still feeling a little hungover from all that, but it was really great. And I'm excited to be talking to you about life and coding and stuff. How are you doing?
Oh, very good. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm really excited because like I was saying earlier, I really love talking to people who are going through the process, are in the trenches, doing the work that's required to get into this field. And I feel like it's important for people to hear stories from real people other than just folks on YouTube, because I feel like there's so much advice out there and not all of it is bad and not all of it is good. And it's like, how do you navigate that? So I'm glad to have you here. So before we dive deep, let's have you just kind of give an introduction of what got you excited about starting to code and, what sparked your interest.
Okay. Well, what first got me interested in coding is really just the stereotype of a coder. Like they're so smart and they solve all the problems. And I've always liked to think of myself as a smart person. So I just wanted to be associated with that whole vibe. And also the money, like that was definitely huge. Like, and the idea of being able to become a developer, with just hard work, you can get there. You don't necessarily have to have a degree. And so that was what first got me interested in coding. But then when I started to learn to code, the humbling experience that it was also really inspiring, and how hard it is, and the types of problems you can solve, and just how great technology is. And to be a part of that seems really great. So
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. For when you were saying like you have to be really smart to do it, I was like, yeah. It's like it's funny because I'm like I'm not that smart, but I'm trying my best. I'm doing it. No, but to be honest, it's like it's definitely not easy, and I'm glad that you kind of said that the challenge of it as well. That excited you about and being able to create things, because I feel like when people start learning to code, everybody has a different opinion of it. And some people think it's something like in 3 months, in 6 months, I could easily make this transition. I'm going to make $1 billion. And then like the reality of it, it is hard. It's not as easy as some people make it out. And so let me ask you a question. Like, let's start from the beginning. Like, how long ago did you start learning to code?
So it was August is when I graduated from a really cheap of last year of a cheap boot camp, and kind of hands off. It was all online too because of COVID, and but I'm not going to use that as an excuse. That you can always find a way to take that information and throw down. And but so that was my introduction into coding, like in a more like standard way, like going down an actual path. And so, and then there I learned React Native, MongoDB, Node, and Express.
Yeah,
and Bootstrap. At that boot camp, and that was my introduction. And it was definitely kind of like you're kind of coding along experience, and it's like, next type this. I'm like, okay, typing it. All right. and then type, okay, I will type that. I don't know what I'm doing here, but then after a while you start to pick up on patterns, and so that's basically my start. And I thought that I was learning a lot at that point.
Yeah.
And now that I've been coding more, I mean, it's like that wasn't even scratching the surface. So yeah.
That's the crazy part, because I remember same feeling, like you start learning something, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so difficult. Like, how am I? And then, like, you know, 2 months goes by, all that other stuff, you're like, that was like the easiest stuff. Now I'm like stuck on this new thing. And then you're like struggling and you're like, what the heck? And then 3 months later, you're like, oh, that was the easy part. Now it's the hard part. So it does progressively continue to stay challenging, which is awesome. And so let me ask you, like, what made you decide to go to bootcamp initially in the first place? Because I know a lot of people ask, like, they're like, should I go to bootcamp? Should I, do self-taught route? Should I go and actually get the computer science degree? Like, what made you decide to go to bootcamp?
Well, for me, it was financial reasons. I just can't really afford at this point to go to like college, and I wanted to just get my feet in,
Yeah.
and my thinking is I'll um, do the boot camp, like get into tech, and then use the money I make to get a degree,
Yeah.
or something like that. That's been my thinking. And also, I have someone that I know, my um, ex brother-in-law. He went to a boot camp and works in tech, but the boot camp he went to guarantees you a job at the end of the boot camp because they have all those connections, and it was just a
Yeah.
bigger boot camp. And so, but that's what made me realize that it's possible. And
Yeah.
so yeah.
No, that's awesome. Like, I feel like there's many paths, like, and none of them are wrong. You just have to decide which path is best for you, which is crazy to talk about, like, college costs in US. It's so out of control. And when I
Mhm.
talk to a lot of people, they're like, why it's even a choice to think about college versus like boot camp or versus self-taught route. And I realized that in some countries, like, the education is subsidized. So they're not going into crazy student debts like you would go into US. Like, that was one of my reasoning not going back to, computer science program, is because I was like, I'm debt free and I can't, and it like took me forever to get to that point. And I'm like, I can't just take on extra debt that's going to be like 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever. Like, the cost of college here is pretty ridiculous. So I ended up going
Yeah.
the self-taught route, but I did think, like, if I don't get hired, I'm going to go to bootcamp. I think the benefit of bootcamp, and there's pros and cons, and there's so many different boot camps out there, so you have to like do your research, but I feel like having some sort of structured path that you follow is important. Because when I started learning to code, it took me 3.5, almost maybe like 4 years. It took me a while to get my first job, and I feel like it's because I had lack of direction, and I tried to learn everything rather than like the stack that you described. I'm like, oh wow, that's like actually like a decent, like, it's a good path,
Mhm.
and you learn like everything you need. And because you're going to boot camp, you don't get a chance to just meander and try to learn things outside of that. You have your program, and I think that structure is good. So do you feel like that was helpful for you? Like, or do you think, like, if you had to do it again, you might have tried the self-taught route?
Well, knowing what I know now, I think I do think the boot camp helped me out a lot because of that path that it gave me. And even though I didn't get like this deep knowledge, just having that helped me afterwards, because I
Yeah.
still have this understanding of like from beginning to end completing a project, for example.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I gained from the boot camp. I feel like it could go either way because it also depends on what kind of boot camp you're going to. And I know
Yep.
someone mentioned, how do they guarantee a they give you a job? Is they'll guarantee it, or they'll give you your money back. So that's how they
Yeah.
guarantee you a job. They'll say you'll get a job in such time, or you get your money back. And so
Yep.
those types of boot camps I feel like are worth are very much worth investing in if you can afford them. They're also very expensive too. But so those types of boot camps are great for structure. But then if you go to like a cheaper one, like I did, you can still gain a lot. Like I gained a lot of understanding, but they don't have the same connections to other like companies, and so I have to do that work on my own.
Yeah, like, to be honest with you, when I look at the guarantees, I think nothing is
Mhm.
100% guaranteed. And I think it's like a way for them to kind of be like, okay, we're going to guarantee this, just if it could encourage someone to sign up to our bootcamp. But at the end of the day, like I'd be curious to see the percentage for any bootcamp. Like, what is the number of people that, let's say, sign up for like the cohort, and how many of those people actually got hired and in what time frame? Because to be honest, like
Mhm.
I have a friend who it's been a while now. It's been like almost 8 months, but she graduated out of a boot camp where they like guarantee you at least an internship, but not all of her classmates were able to get internships, because I think part of it is actually, how were you as a student, like how proactive you were, and what was your involvement of it. So I see like stories from people who go to boot camp, and some people have a good experience, some people have bad experience. And I think a lot of it is the expectation they had, where it's like, oh, the boot camp's going to do everything for me. But at the reality, regardless if they have that job placement guarantee or not, like it's on you. If you don't qualify for a job, you don't qualify for a job, and a boot camp can't actually guarantee that. So if I go to boot camp and I like party all the time, don't learn anything, I'm not going to get a job regardless what guarantee they give. So I feel like at that point of guarantees a bit like moot. So like I don't think people should base their decision on going to bootcamp because of that, but I feel like you should do the research and see that the program that you're doing is current, and it makes sense for you. So I like what you said, like about bootcamp, how it taught you a bit of everything and gave you like that overall picture of what development is. And I feel like now, based on that, you have a good reference point to continue to learn on your own. And I like that you said that, because a lot of people, they think of bootcamp as like, I'm going to learn, and not everybody feels this, but they feel like this is like, I'm going to learn so much that I'm going to be able to get a job. And in my opinion, a bootcamp is an introduction to coding. And like,
Yeah.
if you go to bootcamp and then you stop learning, you're going to forget everything really quickly, and you're not going to benefit from it. But it's just like that nudge in the right direction, I feel like. So based on your experience, like after, actually, let me back up a little bit. How long was the bootcamp that you attended?
6 months.
6 months. Okay. So after, and that's a pretty decent time. I know there's like 3-month boot camps. And I know they all have different like time investment, but how do you, based on where you are now, like how would you assess yourself like after 6 months of boot camp? Like how did you feel? Did you feel like you were job ready? Did you feel like, there's certain areas you needed work?
Well, I felt like I wasn't job ready after my boot camp, and that's why I was struggling to like even apply after I graduated from my boot camp. And then when I finally did start applying, I realized that I should have started applying right away, because even if you're not ready, or you don't really know that, it's like I needed to just go out there, apply, and get a rejection, get some type of feedback so I can like start thinking of the next step. And so when I actually started applying, I regretted waiting so long, before I started applying, because I was waiting to feel ready. And that's something you just don't feel like, apparently, in software development. And
At all. By the way, like
yeah,
just
yeah,
after
you
boot
just
camp, I
don't.
still don't feel ready. I'm like, oh, I still don't know
Yeah,
anything.
yeah, it just doesn't happen. And people kept telling me that. And I was just thinking, but there's got to be at least some point, where I'm like, I I feel competent. And it's like all that you're ever going to feel is after you learn something is you're going to see the next milestone and the next milestone, and so you're never going to feel ready. But in applying for jobs, getting the rejection, it's already giving me something. It's giving me something like, okay, maybe I need to improve my resume. I can tell that my portfolio isn't that great, so let me just go ahead and start working on my next project. And applying too, I got my first take home project to be give for an interview process, and it was all HTML and CSS, and that was something I wasn't mentally prepared for. I mostly focused on JavaScript and not HTML and CSS, and so applying helped me to realize I need to practice CSS more, and put more emphasis on that than I thought I would need to. So
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I like what you said, like I should have started applying earlier, because I feel like that's the biggest mistake a lot of people make. I made it also, is where they're like, number one, I'm going to wait until I feel ready. And the thing is, like, you'll never feel ready. And the second thing, like constantly thinking like you need to learn a little bit more, do a little more. You're constantly pushing the act of actually getting a job farther down the roads. And so it will take you more time. And I really love your feedback where you're like, I went to the interview, even though I got a rejection, it kind of gave me feedback to think about what areas do I have to improve in, or like, is my resume, do I have to improve my portfolio, things like that. And I think that's what people need. They need that constant feedback to help them guide them to do the things that will actually lead them to getting hired. And so when I go to interviews, and people don't owe you this answer, but I always ask, if I don't get hired, I ask like, thank you for the interview, blah, 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 blah. I appreciate your time, but I was wondering, can you give me like a reason why you decided to go with another candidate? Like, and you could say that in the email or a follow-up call, whatever it is. And they don't owe you that answer, but they could give it to you. Like some say, well, we really needed someone who knows TypeScript better, or like whatever the answer is. And you could start kind of getting that feedback and seeing what, you need to do to improve in order to move forward. Yeah. So that's awesome. And coding is hard. I want people to know this. There's no thing like that easy formula where it's like, okay, I'll just go to bootcamp or just do self-study like 3 months, 6 months to get a job. To me, honestly, my time frame, when I tell people, it's at least a year. Maybe some people will get a job sooner, maybe some people get it later, but I believe like you need to set realistic expectations. And I know some people ask about your portfolio. I know I didn't kind of like say that we're gonna like showcase or anything, but we don't have to. But can you just mention like what projects are you working on towards your portfolio, or what projects have you done to give people an idea?
Okay. Yes, well, I've done a lot of different things that weren't much at first. I didn't realize it until I started working on Frontend. Are you familiar with Frontend Mentor?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I've been doing recently. Taking designs created on Frontend Mentor and implementing them. And
Nice.
I'm currently building a project with Remix, TypeScript, and vanilla CSS with the Frontend Mentor project. It's an intermediate level project. And
Nice.
the funny thing is, well, yeah, but the funny thing is, I did the junior level project with this Frontend Mentor one before, and it was kind of easy. So I thought,
Oh,
okay,
I
I'm
got
ready for
this.
intermediate. I'm ready for intermediate. And wow, I mean, the CSS that this is so CSS rich. This project
Wow.
that I
Yeah.
have to build, and so many things I haven't even challenged, and I'm having to learn that, as well as with Remix. And there's just things that I wasn't prepared to have as a challenge, like just simple things like importing a SVG with Remix, for example, or how they stylize their CSS and I'm used to using
Yeah. It's a little bit
SAS.
different.
So having
Yeah.
to, yeah, and so that's been a really interesting change. But what I have gained in this very painful process of building out this intermediate level project that's taken me way longer than I thought it was going to take is how painful it is, and that is what I should be feeling when I am developing my projects, that pain where I'm forced to look
Yeah.
into the documentation to find the answers, and where I'm also forced to plan more ahead. Like some of the projects I built were the kind of projects that I didn't have to plan that much out because I was basing them off of things I had already learned, as
Yeah.
opposed to stretching myself.
Ye-
And
Yeah.
so that's what I've gained from this project. Like I need to be doing that every time. I need to be feeling that pain because that's what software developers do. They try to manage the chaos. And they want to be getting paid the big bucks if you could easily find these answers. And so that's what I'm learning from this project.
Yeah. No, that is awesome. And I like what you said is stretch yourself a little bit farther than before, because I found myself when I were first learning, I would, let's say, build a basic like landing page, and then it'll get comfortable for me and I'll build like 10 more of them. And it's like I haven't learned anything new because I just build the
Yeah.
thing that I'm comfortable building. And so I constantly try to now like push forward and until I feel the pain. And a lot of my coding streams are painful to watch because I do fail and I do struggle, and I do it and I leave them because that's exactly what coding is. It's learning through your
Yeah.
struggle. That's what people have to understand. They'll never feel like 100% everything's so easy. If it is, that means you're not doing what Karen said, is trying to push yourself and step out of your comfort zone and continue to learn new things. And one thing I was gonna say, like I see like a lot of great conversation, by the way, in the chat. And if you haven't smashed the like button, don't smash it for me. Smash it for our awesome guests and our community in the chat here hanging out. And what I was gonna say is, before you decide to go to bootcamp, before you decide to like embark on this journey, it's important to like try it out a little bit. So like before you make a huge commitment, because any investment in money in bootcamp or your education is an important one, and so you don't want to rush into it. Do your research. But with that being said, like definitely get one course on Udemy, give it a try. You know what I mean? See if you like it, see like where it takes you. But so back to Karen. I had to do that.
Well, something I wanted to say
Yeah, go.
that you were saying, you mentioned like how painful it is. So I was looking at one of your streams yesterday, and I was like, this is exactly what I go through. Like it's like it's taking way long to do one thing, and my brain is going, this is going to be simple. I've done this in HTML or whatever, and I start typing out and just, what is this error and why is this here? And it's taking a very long time to solve the problem, and you can't passively figure out the answer. Like my brain would love to just skim through some documentation and just go, oh, okay, copy paste, but you can't. If you're stretching yourself enough, you literally can't do that. You have to understand what's going on. And so and I see that you do that a lot with your stream. You put yourself through that pain in front of people, which is great. Like, so that's what I want to do. I actually am recording myself do this project.
Nice.
And I'm gonna put it up eventually once I edit it. But so I'm starting to understand your pain even more. It's actually very impressive to be able to talk about your code while struggling and keeping a good conversation going. So
yeah, no, that's a great point. And I like the fact that you're like recording your process. And I think people should do it, even if they don't put it out publicly, just to record yourself talking about your code and going through the process. And it's painful to watch at first. Like even to me now, my streams are painful to watch, like especially the coding ones. And so like to me, it's what I found out. The more I struggle, the more I find myself wrestling with like the thing that I'm trying to figure out, and then being able to talk about it, even if it's just recorded to no one watches. Like I feel like I'm getting better at practicing communicating about my code. And when people think about what an interview is, you know, yeah, they could ask many questions, but at the end of the day, it's like you're communicating about yourself, you communicate about your code and your value that you could provide to the company. So if you practice that, you know, not just coding, like I feel like you're preparing yourself to be at a point where if someone, especially like if you went through a lot of sessions when you're coding on yourself, like by yourself, and you're struggling and you finally solve a thing, you kind of learn to think and troubleshoot, which is a very important like skill in development. And so when you're in an interview and someone asks you an unexpected question, like you'll still be able to deal with it, you know. And I think it's great. And so we talked about the journey. It is hard, but it's definitely worth it, 100%. And what both Karen and I figured out, the more you learn, the less you realize you know. I think that's like a very fair statement to make. And so you're working on your projects. I know somebody was asking like the tech stack that you did in the bootcamp. I know you mentioned that at the beginning of the video, but that was like HTML, CSS, Bootstrap. Then you did React, JavaScript, and then you did Node and Express with the Mongo. Nice, awesome, yeah. And I think that's a great start for a lot of people. Now, after going to bootcamp, you started interviewing, and like it was not as easy, which is expected. And you're continuing the process. You started working on your portfolios. You're getting feedback to kind of point you in the right direction. Now, while you're learning, are you still, you know, how often do you apply to jobs at the moment? Is that something you constantly make time for every week, or you're like, okay, no, the imposter syndrome got the best of me. Let me take a little break and work on studying a little bit.
So the way I've been doing it is I will usually like off and on, like apply for like a week and then like kind of see things aren't going well, and then I try to focus on a project so I can just have something else to put on my resume. Like this last week, I haven't applied for any jobs because I've been working on this project, and I want to showcase this one. This is definitely the most challenging thing I've ever built, and it will be a really great conversation in an interview to have. So that's what I've been doing. It's not structured purposely that way. I'll just be applying and applying, and then after a certain level of feedback, I'll go, let me just stop for a second and
Yeah.
just try to implement these changes before I go back. I need to say something different on my resume.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And I think it's kind of important to take the feedback into consideration and really have a realistic look at yourself and be like, this is where I'm at. These are the things that I have to improve. And then do those changes and then continue to applying. I think like there's no right strategy for this as long as people are applying. So you don't want to go like 3 months, 6 months, a year without like
Right.
applying. And when you feel like, I feel like, once you learn to code, obviously, you have to build your portfolio projects to showcase. And I feel like 2 to 3 is like a good place to be. But while you're building those projects, also take into consideration, okay, is my resume well written? Is there things I could do to improve it? Is there, and then like reviewing your portfolio projects, practicing like reaching out to people to like schedule the interview. That's like a skill in itself. So when you made your resume, when you were kind of looking to apply, did you just do it, or did you like, watch what other people were doing, looked at and found some resources or stuff like that? What was your process?
Well, so yeah, I definitely looked at other people's resumes, and I just like every connection I had on LinkedIn, I just went through all of their stuff.
Yeah.
Just like, what do you have going on? And just tried to copy as much of that as I can. That's when I started doing open source for the first time.
Nice.
Um, yeah, that was really nice, really cool to just like try that. And so I did that, and it was just a very basic layout. And each time, like I would feel like my resume wasn't quite where I wanted it to be, even when as I was done with it, but I couldn't put my finger on it at the time. And then after applying, it's like, oh, this is what it needs. My language isn't very strong, and I don't really like this layout. And then going on to Canva, that it's a templating
Yep.
resume app, and that one allows you to really stylize your resume even better than I was using like these template style ones before. And so I finally have one with my picture up and like aligned in a certain way. And so that's what I would do is because I'm never really satisfied with anything my resume related, and then
Yeah.
it'll just like hit me like, that's what I need. And then it's just constantly evolving. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for me, like the resume was a big one because I had a resume, but I was literally getting 0 clicks through it. And even though I had the same information I have on my resume now, the way it was formatted, it was just not what like people in the industry who are making that decision were looking for. And so every time they saw my resume, they're like, oh, this person doesn't know what they're doing. And they would literally not look at it. And it was only after I reformatted my resume that I started getting people actually responding to it. And I was kind of shocked where the information is basically the same, but the fact that it's formatted in a way that's hard to read and you can't skim it in 2 seconds to get a good feel of like what the candidate has, that was like a big turn off for a lot of people. And so I got literally no calls until I updated my resume. And sometimes what happens, people will fall into that place where it's their resume, it's not their skill, but they'll keep going, taking Udemy courses or studying or building projects. But if you're not getting like 0 calls, it's like maybe the resume is just doesn't talk about you in a way that people get excited to respond. And like, that's just the truth. And so I feel like people need to kind of keep, all of that in mind. It's like learning to code is one skill, but getting hired is a whole separate skill, which involves like being able to talk about yourself, making sure you have a well-written resume, and talking about, making connections, reaching out to recruiters. And I think that's like a very big part of it. And I know like the way you and I met, Karen, actually is we met at a meetup, and I feel like a lot of people should go to meetups. So let's kind of take the conversation there. How did you decide to go to a meetup? And I was also going to say, for me at the beginning, that was just going to a meetup felt very intimidating. Can you tell us how that was for you?
Oh yeah, it was definitely intimidating. So the first meetup I went to is this React meetup, and um, what made me decide to do it was just that I hadn't communicated with anyone in tech, like in person. My boot camp was online as well, so I felt very outside of like out of the, I guess, just not in the club basically.
Yeah.
And so I went to the first meetup and I was very nervous. It was a lot of people there, a lot of guys there. I was the only girl there that time. And that was somewhat uncomfortable at first, but I just
Mm.
said, you know what? I didn't come all this way just to sit here in the corner. So, so you're just gonna have to go to people. And what I found is that it's such a supportive community. Like, like everyone is willing to give you all kinds of advice
Yeah.
even before you ask. And they're just talking about anything. Like you learn so much just listening to them talk. You're like, I don't know what that is, but you're talking about it like this is something that should be obvious to me. So I'm gonna go look that up later.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that is a really Yeah, and that is a really good experience. And it also was more inspiring and motivating because I got to see and meet people who were going through what I'm going through, and realizing I'm not working hard enough because I like he had like one guy has like three portfolio websites, and he's just, when I first meet him and I'm like, wow, what? And he's
What
showing
the
me all of
heck?
his stuff, you know. And so
He's
it's like,
just farther
and that
along
is
in his journey, but
right. He learned the lessons, and I'm starting to learn them now. And but that's great, getting out there and just talking to people. It did so much. It's like once you go to a meetup, I feel like it's very hard to go back home
yeah.
and do things the way that I did it before. Like I'm on a buzz now. I am just ready to go. Uh, and it's so supportive. Like I've still talked to people I've met at meetups. It's really great.
Yeah, no,
What about
that
you?
that's
What was your
that's a
first experience like?
you're not gonna believe this. I went to like few meetups early on, but it was like not that many. But it was until I like moved back to Texas. Like the Remix meetup was like my first meetup in a while. And so that's how I kind of started. And when I talked to you, you were telling me I went to this React meetup, you should go check it out. And you're so excited. I was like, you know what? I gotta do more. And when I used to go to meetups before, I just felt too intimidated that I didn't know enough to like even understand what people were talking about. But you're right, like the meetups are so friendly. And this is like one thing I was gonna say. When you go online, and this is like, especially like sometimes they go to my YouTube, people come in and they're like, you suck, your code sucks, everything sucks, blah, blah. And to me, that's a sign of two things. Either that person is not a developer or they're immature. Because if you go to a meetup, first of all, people are so nice to you, they're so helpful. And everybody who I talk to who's a real developer, they never make fun of you for anything. They will literally help you out and help you get better. And that's kind of, to me, what I realized, this disconnect between people online and how they talk about things versus like in reality, like what the situation is. So like, don't feel like you're going to be judged at a meetup. Just go. It's a lot of fun. Everybody there is there to help you to get better. And another cool thing about meetups is that every meetup is different, but a lot of them do also, like, they're sponsored by the company that does the meetup. They'll tell you, oh, we have this many openings. If you want to apply, just see me and give me your resume. And I feel that's another important part of a meetup. It's not that you become part of the community, which is important, but you start to build these connections of people you meet that might be able to take your resume and refer you to someone else or refer you to their company, which is 1,000 times better than blindly sending your resumes online. It's just the facts. If you have like the Remix meetup, that's what Brooks says. He says, he's like, if you give me a resume, someone will definitely see it. and you might get an interview. Obviously, it's like up to you to pass the interview, but you're like literally passing the line when someone refers you. And I think that's important. So, what other meetups did you go? I know I met you at the Remix, but what meetups did you go to that you really liked locally or where you've been?
Well, I really like the Remix meetup a lot. I like the setup. The first one I went to was React. Those are the only two. I've been pretty consistently going to the Remix and the React one, except for the last one was canceled for the React one, and then I didn't go to the following one.
Yep.
But yeah, it's those two, and I feel like that's a lot, because I'm a very introverted person, and so it will take a lot for me to warm up
Yeah.
to an environment, and I do want to make real connections with people, and like I don't want to just go, hey, what's your LinkedIn and give me a connect. I'm
Yeah. No.
hoping to like see people enough and like get to know them, and so that's been like my thinking about it. I'm actually very surprised to hear that you were intimidated going to the Remix meetup
Oh, I'm
because you then
introverted. People
went the
don't
next.
believe it. I'm super
Well, the crazy
introverted.
thing
I'm
is,
super scared of
but you
anything
presented like the
public.
next meetup.
So here's a story about me. Like, so by nature, I'm very introverted. So like if I like, so I'll give you an example. After that presentation, 5 minutes, I literally needed to go home and sleep for like 2 days because it just takes so much energy for me, this outgoing. But
Hmm.
Brian, he found me on YouTube, but we both went to school together and we both took public speaking class, and he'll vouch for me. It's like, man, Paul like, I don't know how he didn't flunk out of that course because he was just terrible. But what people don't understand is that in my past job that I did for almost 15 years, it was all talking to people. So this is like skill developed over like many, many years. And this is what I tell people, like when you're introverted, you see someone like me who says he's introverted and you're like, no, you're an extrovert, stop being a liar. It is a skill, right? I have many friends who are introverts, but part of their job, they have to talk at the team meetings, they have to do this, whatever. And it's a skill that you develop. And so I'm glad to have you. By the way, big respect coming on stream, going to meetups. Like I see you engaging on Twitter more, is getting yourself out there publicly, because making connections will go farther than anything you think. Because reality of a situation, it's all about who you know. And most people don't want to hear it, but that's the facts. And the more people you know and the more likable you are, the more opportunities you will have. It's like, don't get mad at me. It's just the facts. And so I always urge people to get out there, and like I commend you for like going through that process, especially if you're an introvert, because it is very, very difficult. But with practice, it might not get easier, but you'll at least be able to present yourself in a way better and better. And the more connections you have, the more comfortable you get talking about your code, talking to people, the better you would do in an interview, because you're just not going to freeze up. And so that's awesome. And so right now you're continuing to work on your projects. You're, going through the interviews. Do you like, a lot of people, they'll start a thing and then they'll just do it and then see what happens. But do you set yourself like little timelines and little goals in the process? Or do you kind of like just do what you think you should do?
I do set timelines, but one thing I'm realizing a lot is, I my what the timelines I set tend to be unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I was expecting to be done with this project I'm working on now, like today, and I was actually hoping to show you this project, but I am not close to done because there's just so many things that I am like having to learn in the process, and it's just making it take a little longer. I'm sure if I were to build a project similar to this next time, it'd be way faster, but
Yeah.
it's just, so I try to set a timeline, but I'm also learning to not get too hung up on
Yep.
that deadline, because that's how I can get burnt. I start burning out. I try to do too much, or I'll be working on the project until like my brain is mush and I can't, and then I'm like done for a couple of weeks, which I hate when I hit burnout. So I'm learning to just stop and just,
Yeah.
because that's going to slow me down more, is like burning myself out than just like a slower, steadier pace.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And, you know, it's just so hard to balance all of that stuff. But I feel like it's important for people to have some sort of sense and direction and a timeline, even if it might not be accurate, to kind of continue to push yourself in the same direction. And I feel like having constraints like in your study and what you're focused and the type of development job you want to get, because there's plenty. Like for instance, I just chose front end because I literally felt Frontend React developer would be the quickest way for me to get there. I didn't even focus on the back end, when I first started. And I think having that direction and timelines and moving forward is important. And one thing I wanted to ask you is, do you have like an idea of or for yourself in your mind, like what things do you need to have before someone could go start like applying? Like for instance, what does that look like for you in your mind?
So, for me, I haven't finished my portfolio website. I do
Mm-hmm.
have stuff on my GitHub, but I haven't actually made a website. And that's because, and I feel like it's because I wasn't very like the types of things that were in my GitHub were not as challenging. I'm realizing as I've been challenging myself more. And so I really want to have like conversation pieces on my portfolio website. And so that's something I feel like I really need to have, but I've still been applying because I know that you don't necessarily have to have it, but it's actually really competitive down here. And so anything that will separate me, I'm going to try to do that. So that's the one thing I think that is really holding me back, because I don't have a portfolio website and I really want to build that out.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you're absolutely right. Like a lot of people say like there's no junior level jobs. It's not that there's no junior level jobs. It's just number one, like the skill that we think a junior needs to know might be not what it actually is. So we might not be at that level yet. And then the places are competitive because this is like a very, hot field to be in. And so it's important to make sure that you kind of have the right expectations and you're doing the things that you need to do. And so, yeah. And so you're working on your project, and from your standpoint, and we could talk more about like my standpoint, like what do you, in your mind, what do you think a junior developer should know to get hired, like technical level? Like what do you think they should be able to build or do?
I really think Frontend Mentor is a great place for junior developers. Now that this is my second project with Frontend Mentor, I think that is really, it's a type of challenge that you can't easily find in a tutorial, because that's like what I would do. I did like a blog site, which is kind of like a to-do app basically. Um, and a lot of the stuff I was doing was basically just a rendition of a to-do app. And I realized later on that, this is actually very obviously a tutorial based project that I'm doing. And I need to do something that proves that I can solve a challenging problem for my skill level. So like something, I just feel like it's just if you use a tutorial to build the project, then that's not the project. That's what I really feel is
Yeah.
like it needs to be a type of project that required you to stretch, and you can easily tell if it did that or not based off of the conversation the interviewer has with you, like they'll and talking about your challenges and being able to document it very well. So I feel like that is something that I've learned that I was not doing, that I am doing now, is looking to hurt my brain in the process
Yeah.
of building it. That's how I know that I'm doing something good.
Yeah. And I feel like that's what like a lot of people like think. It's like, oh, just because I can make a simple website or web page even by itself, it's like I'm ready. And to me, it's like much more. So like for me, the basic like requirements, like people obviously need to know HTML and CSS. They need to know JavaScript, and within JavaScript, they need to be able to be comfortable working with APIs, basically making, calls to get some data and then be able to display that data, and then knowing a framework. And basically, at the bare minimum, you should be able to make an application that has create, read, update, and delete capabilities. And you don't even have to create the backend yourself. Like I always talk about using like a CMS like Strapi for an API, but there's many APIs available. You could even do like JSON placeholder API. There's like JSON server that you could do, that you could create this makeshift database where you could make these requests. But I feel at the bare minimum, you should be able to create an application that demonstrates like CRUD functionality where you're able to also work with APIs to get data. And that actually already sounds like a lot, on top of everything else that we need to know. So it's definitely not an easy journey, and it just takes time. But one thing that I wanted to kind of talk about, so a lot of people, like, they learn to code, that's a skill, but getting out there and going to interviews, that's a whole total different skill. So I know you mentioned you're working on your portfolio. Are you building your portfolio site yourself, or are you building projects for your portfolio?
I'm building the site myself, and well, right now I'm building some a site for my portfolio website, but I want to build the site myself. I know you don't have to do that, but what do you think about that?
I would say anybody who just starting out, like, don't do it. And I'll tell you the reason why. And so I'll actually, and I'll tell you what I did. And the reason why, it's like you're still learning. And so you're not, like, any portfolio website you build for yourself will have mistakes. And it will have some of the things that maybe you didn't know that they could be done better. And that's something that you're putting as your front-facing thing, which people will go to, and they'll right away, like, if something doesn't work right, or they find something, they're right away going to have a negative connotations of it. So instead, like I recommend people just get a template and set up a portfolio website using a template. And because the portfolio website is not to showcase your skill, it's to showcase who you are, where you're coming from, what skills do you have, and then within that portfolio, you will have your projects. And the good news about that, let's say you have one bad project you're not happy with, when you make a better project, you could replace it. So there's, I don't know if you've seen my website. I'll share my screen. But I feel like if you're not watching on YouTube, you might not see my shared screen, but I'll share it here. And so this is my portfolio website, and you could go to paulbratslavsky.com. Good luck spelling my last name, but it's Bratslavsky. And you could see it that I literally use a template, which basically has an about section, my skills of the things, and I have to update this. I haven't updated in a while. It has my resume, at least the important parts of it. It has a contact page for people to be able to contact you. And this is where you would put your projects. Now, I specifically don't have any projects in mind at this point, because I wanted to use this as an opportunity to say that you don't have to have projects. Just get started with a portfolio, which showcases like who you are. Even the skills section, like for instance, I have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, JS, whatever other technologies I was learning. Even if you don't have all these skills, put the skills that you are learning to have this page to be like a roadmap for you to continue learning the skills. But don't create it yourself. Basically, use a template. And if anybody is wondering where I got this template, there's this website called Bootstrap Made. And that's where I went and got this template. And they're free. Like, here's exactly the template that I used, the iPortfolio. And literally set it up and you're done. And as you build your projects, you'll be able to add your projects to your portfolio. I hope that makes sense. But the reason why is that I think that's going to be responsible for making a good first impression of yourself. Don't leave it to chance, and set up something that makes sense and is useful, and so that's why I would recommend start with a template. That way you don't have to worry about it. It's out there, and then you could just focus on building projects to put in there.
Okay, that's really good advice. I actually didn't think about how building my own portfolio website would be problematic, but
don't worry about it, because this is how I learned about it. I build it, and then people like, your portfolio is broken. Like, nothing works. And I'm like constantly trying to fix it. And so that's preventing me from actually doing the other stuff, continue learning, continue whatever. So, like after making that mistake for a couple of years, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just go with a template, done and easy, and then just focus on building my portfolio. And I really liked while talking, my brain is scattered, so like I'm gonna reach. But you talked about Frontend Mentor, and you talked about how the reason why you like it is because they give you challenges that you solve. And to me, that what you're doing is something that I preach, which is work on building projects from scratch and not a tutorial, right? And I think that's what flexes your muscle. And I think I'm very happy, and that's awesome that you're doing that, because I saw someone ask the question, can you ask her how to get out of tutorial purgatory? So let's have you give your thoughts on tutorial hell, because it's so common and a lot of people waste so much time there. Yeah, so what's your thought on that?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, I didn't realize I was in tutorial hell because I kept hearing about that. And I'm like, well, I'm happy doing tutorials and building out those projects that I'm watching in a tutorial. And I feel like I'm getting better. I'm understanding like syntax. I'm understanding like those core principles very well. And it wasn't until I built a project like this from scratch that I realized I was in tutorial hell, and I was actually like just getting good at something I already knew. And so Frontend Mentor, I feel like, is an amazing way to get out of tutorial hell, because when you build your own projects, like when I build my own projects, I'm kind of already tailoring it to what I know I can do, like in every way, even in styling. Like I would might have 30 lines of CSS if I could have it my way,
Yeah.
with my project. And then I do Frontend Mentor, and you cannot, like do that. They're definitely going to give you something you never thought of. I wouldn't mind showing one of the last Frontend Mentor project. I can send it to you. Um, let's see,
Yeah, if you like
because
to
I just
also
love.
share your screen too, that whatever
Oh,
is
okay,
easiest for you, you could send it to me too. I think there's a share screen button somewhere.
I see it. I'm gonna just go to my GitHub and I'll have to go to my different
Yeah, but I like that about
Gmail.
that. I when you see someone show you the requirements of the thing that you want to build, you can't just go to what you are comfortable with, because you have to follow the requirements. And I like that. I actually didn't think about that, because you're right. Like I do have a preference for how I do things, and you know, when I'm building stuff. So
Yeah, and if you can't figure something out that was your idea, you can just never put it in there and no one would know. But
yeah,
with with Frontend Mentor, you definitely are proving whether you can solve that problem or not. Like, because it's very easily uh, you can see that, and so that is something that I really like about Frontend Mentor. I'm going to my completed challenge, view
yeah. There's a
code.
the comment about like building things from scratch and stuff like that. Someone's like, this advice of Paul does well, Northern Chimp said it. This advice of Paul does logically make sense, but it's mentally really difficult to accept. Um, but the reality
It
is like
is.
you gotta build stuff yourself. You know. Yeah, but let me know when you have the project ready, or if
Okay.
it's easier to send the link, you could do that as well. Oh, there you are. You're sharing it. Let me bring that to the thing with in here. All right, so people see your project. Nice.
Okay. So this is Frontend Mentor, and they give you a challenge, and let me go to, yeah, they give you a great challenge. I'm going to go to my challenge. Wait, okay, latest solution, yeah. And you even get points if you're active in the community, like leaving
Nice.
comments on other people's stuff. That gets you more points too. And you have to get to a certain level of points before you can say, hire me. So like they'll know that you've done enough projects. And so they give you a design and you just follow the design. And the cool things I learned in this project were like
And this is
about
the one that you
CSS.
built right here.
Yes. Yeah. This is
That
mine.
looks so
This is the
nice.
Vercel. You deploy it on, they have you deploy it on Vercel, so you have to deploy it as well. So that's challenging. Anyone who's never deployed a site, with Frontend Mentor, you have to. So that's another really great feature of Frontend Mentor. And the ways that this particular challenged me was really surprising. Like just in the CSS images, like this image here, uh, trying to get all the images in the upper corner
Oh, that's
with
all
and
CSS. Wow.
right. Yeah, it's
Nice.
just this is what's right. And then the responsive layout um, is another great feature I like about this. So like if I shrink it down more, now I have to
Yeah.
make the rows like this, and they also wanted this picture cut out for some reason, but that's what the design wanted. And then now it's a row,
Yeah.
everything. And then the
Wow.
slideshow is another feature and things like that. This is mostly just obviously just HTML and CSS, and this is the little bit of JavaScript for this particular challenge. But yeah, it's a really great challenge.
Th- there's so
And
much
I
value that I see here. Like I like how the statement you made, I don't know why they have the picture cut out like that, but that's what they wanted. And that's literally what at work you're going to experience. It's not like, how would you do this? It's like, here's the requirements for the website. We want this to be exactly this way. We want this to be that way. And you literally have to be able to follow those requirements and build your projects. And what I like about what you're demonstrating is that you basically are learning to get requirements, work from those requirements, and complete the project that you were assigned to complete. And you're literally simulating by, like here is like what you would actually be doing at your job. And I think I like that. So one thing I would say to you, like this looks really awesome. I would actually take this website, and you said this was the Next.js, or is it just straight up? Oh no, just HTML, CSS.
right.
Yeah. So
And my
this is
next
what.
project is in it's
Oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just saying the next project I'm building right now is going to be with Remix, and because it has multiple pages. So yeah.
Yeah. So here's what I like do, and I feel like this is something you could do. So you're not constantly like doing more of the same thing. So this looks like wonderful. And what I would say is like you already built the HTML and CSS for this. So now a challenge for you would be recreate this in Remix. So use exactly this layout so you don't have to wait, like spend time building a new layout. And then once you do it with Remix, because right now this is like all the data here is like hard coded, like the text is hard coded in the HTML. And so the next thing you could do after you build your site with Remix is like have it dynamically be served. You could either use like Remix in itself, or you could use a CMS where you could have this data, where you could have this API where you're basically showcasing that you understand how APIs work and how you could get like add data to websites. And that way, and then I would just put it on your portfolio. Be like, hey, this is HTML and CSS that I built. I used Remix to do this. This is where and how I get the data. This is the database that it uses. And then now you have like one project done. And the reason why I say this is because what I used to do before is I'll do one project, and then another project will be completely different, and then another project will be completely different. And every time you do that, the time you're spending is a lot because you're always building stuff from scratch. So what I would say, if you're already built a little thing, and I was just going to mention to you because it just looks awesome. And let me switch back to interview
Oh,
mode.
I should.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. And I'm trying to move the mouse, and I'm like, why isn't it working? And then my cat just spilled my coffee everywhere. So it's fantastic. So I have coffee on my desk everywhere, but I'll get there. It's no big deal. And so I like that idea that don't try to start from zero each time. Like, so right now, like I'll use your project because it looks wonderful. You just build that HTML and CSS project from Frontend Mentors. Now take that and build it in Remix And now when you're focusing on building thing with Remix, you're not focusing on the HTML, CSS you build because you already did it. And so you really get to spend more time on Remix specific stuff. And then when you're done, you have that HTML, CSS, you have that Remix app, and now work on making that data dynamic, either by using Remix completely as a full stack, where you could set up, database and make requests to the database to get the data to populate your website, or you could even do like using a CMS. But what happens is you're taking your HTML skill and then you're transferring to your Remix project, so you're not recreating the HTML and CSS. Then you're taking that Remix or that front end project and you're figuring out how to connect it to a back end. And then now you have like a full stack representation of a project that you could now stick into your portfolio. And that's one project done. And then you could start your second project doing and following the same steps. Let me create the HTML, CSS first, then let me put it into a framework, and then let me add like some sort of backend functionality. And each time you're practicing like the full gamma. And that's kind of like what I started to do more. I'm not saying everybody should do it, but I just do it because I'm lazy. And I'm like, since I already made the front end, the HTML and CSS, let me just reuse it for like the Remix and stuff like that. And I think like a lot of people, overcomplicate their projects at the beginning. And I've done that a lot, but yeah, that really looks awesome. And actually I've heard about Frontend Mentor, so I never used it, but now I'm like very excited to do it because I think it's important for us to have challenges to solve. No, that's awesome.
That's really great advice. I can see the value in starting with the base and then building on top of it. I think if I had done that with the project I'm building now, it actually would be less complicated to start with what I know and then build on top of that. So yeah, thank you.
No. I mean, everybody's learning lessons. I still don't know everything, but one thing that I realize is that this is why you need to be part of the community. This is why you need to talk to other people, because with the more people you talk to, the more things you learn. Like the one point that, talking to you today, that I never ever thought about, why it's important to do things like Frontend Mentor challenges, where you get a requirement and then you have to build it based on the requirements. Because a lot of times when I create my own thing, I'm always biased by the things that I do well. And so I'm always going to do things in a very similar way, like you mentioned. And I never ever thought about it. And now I'm like, oh man, I'm going to go do some of these Front Mentor challenges, because it'll be a good way to kind of keep yourself, it's like, keep yourself always like in the process of what it would be like if you were at work and doing the thing that you are assigned to do. It's like, here are the requirements. You can't do your thing. You can't improve the design. This is what the client wants. And it's actually harder to build something within requirements than it is to do it yourself. Because when you do it yourself, you're like, this image is not as round. That I'm fine with it. Where at a job, like,
That's
no,
on
it has to
purpose.
be this. Yeah, it's exactly. But on the requirements, like, this is how it has to be. And people want to see that. So kind of talk about what a junior web developer should be able to do is not and I'm really happy that Front Mentor exists. And it's great to hear like your experience with it, is being able to take a design and translate it to HTML and CSS and have it be as close to pixel perfect as possible, because it matters. It's not, I kind of made a design. No, I made the design specific based on the requirements I made. And then being able to make like API calls to do full crowd functionality. Like once you feel people are, like in my opinion, people are able to do, I would right away start applying and start doing things. And and so what's the new project you're working on?
So the new project I'm working on is actually I forgot, I'm not sharing. I can. And one thing I wanted to add is with Frontend Mentor, there's levels to it. So there's like a noob level, junior, intermediate, advanced, and guru. And they can require different things. Like there are some junior level ones that will have JSON data. So you can find, if you want
Oh,
to
nice.
so you can do JavaScript. The reason why I picked this HTML and CSS project was because of that take home project I had to do for an interview.
Yeah.
And that was only in HTML and CSS. And I realized that my CSS skills were weak and I needed to work on that. So yeah, that's something I wanted to add about Frontend Mentor. So you can challenge all the things you want to challenge, and you don't have to do JavaScript. Some people will uh, do a different programming language to try to get the same results with the design. So yeah, what I'm building right now is this. I can show you.
Yeah, you can share your screen again.
Okay. Let's see here. So, okay. So my challenges, I got to, how do I get there? Okay. Where do I get my challenges? As you can see, latest solution, but where is my?
It's like, nope.
Okay.
There's always like websites where everything is like straightforward, and then one feature would be like, how do I do that? I was
It's crazy because I was just looking at it.
I was yesterday at this website. It was hilarious because it was like a thing like I was like, I want to buy this thing, and like I couldn't for the life of me figure out where the buy button was on the website that I was
Yeah.
using, and I'm like, I'm going back to Amazon because it's like, yeah.
I made that way more complicated than I should have because I have the Figma file on my computer. So,
Gotcha.
so yes, so the current project is so it's 4 pages and it's pretty design rich um, with these different images and layouts. And I'm going to be using JSON data for some of this so I can try some of the remix features out, like the loader
Nice.
data. And as for like the frequently asked questions, that's going to be dynamically generated. And this part of with the careers will be dynamically generated as well. But then this is also the challenging part too is really the CSS, I would say.
Yeah.
And uh, it's a very responsive layout. So this is the tablet version and then the mobile version. So this is what I'm currently working on. I have gotten as far as this nav bar and this header image, and I was just on it. Let me see. It's this. So this is how far I've gotten where my menu is working and there's a little overshadow, and this is the small size for the screen and a little button action. But yeah, but
Yeah,
the
I
layout
think
has to change with a different size. So
I
yeah.
think like you were showing us your browser. I don't know if my computer
Oh, sorry.
froze, but I still see the Scoot multi-page website which shows the brief, and
Okay.
so I'm not sure if it's either my screen froze or you're sharing a different tab where you're showing your project, but it's okay.
I think it was me. Which one is it? Okay. And then here. So this is my results right now. Can you see it?
Nice. Yeah. Now
Yeah.
I see it.
So
So it's showing
I've
the
started with the
mobile view.
mobile.
Yep, mobile
Yeah,
first.
that's as far as I've gotten. And then with the different sizes, a different arrangement. So I just don't have that design yet, but I have the small
Nice.
mobile version. Yeah. And the little button. And that took me way longer than I thought it was going to take, honestly, because of all the other like TypeScript. I was unfamiliar with that and Remix. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, no, like you're definitely challenging yourself. You're going through the steps, and that's the most important part to see is that I keep switching to the wrong screen. Oh,
Oh,
nope, that's me this time. Here we go. Um, and
yay.
yeah, and no, that's awesome. Like it's great to see that you're putting yourself in places where you constantly stay challenged. I think that's the important thing is to have your path, your goal, where you're going, and to continue to put yourself where you're not doing the same thing all over again, but you're always doing something slightly past your comfort level and continue to move forward. And you're building cool stuff. And what I would say is like continue doing um, what you're doing. And one thing I was gonna say, because it's such a big part of like, applying, building projects, and a lot of times when we do it by ourselves, we don't have any feedback. And I think like um, what people should strive to do is to find someone that you could talk to about your projects if you can, someone who's done it before. And by the way, because we know each other, Karen, I'll be happy to talk to you about your stuff and give some feedback,
Yay.
and not even just like in the project part of it, but also the like going to the interviewing in terms of like what should you have, like how should you optimize your resume, like resume review and stuff like that. Because I think like getting a second opinion on what you're doing is very important, because you could be doing something that you might not even realize is not helping you. And if there's no one to tell you that, like you won't know, and you'll be wondering, I'm applying, why am I not getting hired? And so for everybody who is, in this journey of learning to code, find someone like a friend who's a developer, or if you don't have any friends in person who are developers, join communities. There's so many Discord channels. You could even ask me, how's my resume work? How's my portfolio work? What do you think about it? And I think like a lot of those questions could, be only answered in those individual type of like conversations. And so find someone in the community, find a friend, and go through the process. So like, I think Karen, like I really love what you're doing, and like I want you to, succeed and continue to do what you're doing. And I'll definitely be more than happy to jump on and like look at your portfolio, look at your LinkedIn, look at your, resume and stuff like that, to give my thoughts, my feedback. And I think and by the way, I do the same thing myself. Like I always show like, hey, how's my resume work, like looks and stuff like that. So, um,
I'd
what is,
appreciate that. And that's something that's so great about the community.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is why we're here. And I guess like what I wanted to say is, so right now you're still looking for getting hired. You're in the process. So, I'd love to hear, kind of um, like how do you do with motivation? Because a lot of people say like, you just have to be motivated, but sometimes like I don't feel motivated, but I just know that you have to keep going through. So like, how's your motivation? Like, how do you keep yourself going forward and moving forward?
Um, I'm I'm pretty competitive, and that helps out a lot. But I think what's really been helping me to get more motivated, especially recently, is just trying to dive as much as I can into the coding community. And I've been challenging myself. So I recently, because I kind of watch too much TV, and so I said to myself as a challenge that I will not watch TV unless it's related to code, and or if it's like with family, or it's like a community building exercise. And I'm it's been like 2 weeks of that so far, and that has been great actually, because um, like what I've realized is like it's what was showing me that I am so like I am so just scratching the surface of things and listening to other people talk about code all the time, whether, and it could be different things. Like sometimes I'm in the mood to learn about CSS, sometimes it's something related to how I'm going to build out my project, or just like what's happening in the community, like with Twitter, or with the hiring freezes and stuff like that. Just being involved, it's like I can't keep hearing all of that all the time and not want to sit down and code out my own project. And so I think that's been really great, just listening to it and listening to other people's excitement and letting that rub off on me. And just like staying humble has been really helpful too, because when I start to get a little cocky and I start thinking like, I'm really starting to understand this, and that's when I slow down. Or I'm not, or I'm just like trying to be comfortable and cozy in what I'm doing. And so when I'm humble, actually, is when I'm most motivated, because it's there is no painless way through this,
Yeah.
is what I'm learning. Like you have to really they're paying you a lot of money for a reason.
Yeah.
And so you have to really earn that. And anyone who has that title earned it, you know? And so that's something that motivates me too.
That is such a good point. Like to literally be like, hey, this if this was easy, everybody would be doing it and everybody would be making the amazing money that comes with it. But it's not easy. It is hard, and it's important for people to know that. And I think that's part of the charm for me is that I'm developing a skill, you're developing a skill that's in demand and that is in an industry that tends to be on a higher paying side. And so, you know, again, depending where you live, I know every country is different, but to me, it's so worth it. And it took me almost 4 years to get my first job. And my first job was really low paying. And then over time, you know, 2 to 3 years, it's like you could get to a point where you could be making six-figure income, which is pretty amazing. And I think it, like a lot of people are worried, like, oh, people are laying people off, but people laying people off in other industries. Like the only reason you hear like stuff related to tech is because we're all on tech Twitter, right? But like nobody is like, if the economy is bad, the economy is bad. And so like to say like, well, they're laying off so many people and, you know, yeah, it's true. But there's also a lot of companies hiring. Like for instance, you and I go to
Mhm.
Remix Austin Meetup. Brooke's always like, my company's hiring, you know? And so there's still plenty of opportunity. But I feel instead of like worrying on the negativity and everything that's going on, just focus on doing the work, focus on studying, focus on building your projects and getting after it, you know, and you're going to get there. Don't think about the time because you'll never get it right. And you're either going to be like overestimating or underestimating. And so don't set these unrealistic expectations that if they don't get met by a certain time, you're going to feel sad, you're going to depressed. And so don't do that. Just worry about, okay, I know I need a portfolio site. I know I need a resume. I know I need to have a good LinkedIn profile. I know I need to have my GitHub. I know I need to have 3 projects in my portfolio, and just make a plan and do those things and go after it. And that's exactly what you're doing. So it's amazing to see. And so I don't want to like hold you up forever. So before we go, are there any last like thoughts or words of wisdom that you would give to someone who's looking to either start learning to code or on the same journey as you, still in the process?
Hmm. The I guess I would say getting out there has been the biggest like game changer for me. Like going to meetups. Don't be afraid to get connected. Like join a community as soon as you possibly can, and you'll get so much advice. I mean, even if you don't ask, they'll just start talking, and
Yeah.
you'll be learning so much, you know. And that's probably the biggest like game changer for me was talking to people. And I actually had a question for you. How do you stay motivated? You mentioned that you don't, but you sometimes you don't have motivation, but you're like on
Yeah.
Twitter, you're active on
So,
LinkedIn, you post regularly.
so for me, like motivation comes and goes. Sometimes I'm really motivated, sometimes I'm not. And so to me to say like, oh, I love this every day of my every minute waking life, it's not true. Like there's times I just don't want to do anything. And so to me, motivation is something that if you have it, great, but if you don't, you don't. And like for me, it's the process of doing something daily that keeps me like moving closer to my goals. And that's why I asked, because there's like a like motivation like webs and flows, and sometimes when people don't feel motivated, they just quit. But the reality is, like, just because you don't feel motivated doesn't mean that you gotta stop or do the work, because like there's a lot of things I don't feel motivated like in my life, like doing laundry yesterday. I didn't really want to do it, but we just have to do the things we like and don't like. And sometimes there's parts that we feel, you know, are just not motivating. And for me, it's I don't use motivation as a way for me to get stuff done. I use my schedule, like basically like every day, bare minimum, I need to spend 30 minutes coding, like inside the code editor, you know, and every day I try to hit that mark. And that way, if I feel good, I feel bad, I coded that 30 minutes or whatever that time frame could be, whatever the goal is for you. And so for me, it's the daily routine versus the motivation. And when I'm motivated, to be honest, I'll spend way too much time coding. Like, like last weekend, I literally coded the whole weekend because I was like, oh, I want to make these improvements like in my project. And then when I'm not motivated, I'll still do something like the minimum that I can, but just do something every day. And to me, that's been my approach. But and I see like a lot of people, a lot of great comments. And Alex, I guess he was asking how long ago did you start learning? And you said that was in August, or did you complete the bootcamp in
Yeah,
August?
I completed the boot camp in August. That was of last year.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's been over a year.
Yeah, and that's fine, and it's good that people hear this because that's the reality. Like, there's this idea of like 3 months, 6 months, maybe 1-2% of people will be able to do that. It took me almost 4 years, so the journey is real. It's hard, and you got to do it. But I think you're doing awesome things, Karen. Thank you for coming on the podcast and talking about your experience. I think it's really helpful for people to hear from real people, not like YouTube influencers. Like, hey, this is what the process is, and just set realistic expectations. And I'm definitely 100% like serious, like about getting together and going over your resume, going over your projects, and any questions you may have, because I think you're like so close, and I would really, want you to get hired like as quickly as possible. So anything I could do to help, let me know. So
That'd be
thank
great.
you. Yeah, thank you so much. It was awesome. And I met Karen at a meetup, and so this is more reason for all of you to go on meetups. Try in person if you can. If you can't, I guess like online is great. But you meet cool people in the community, and you get to talk about code. So really, really awesome. So thanks everyone. Thank you in the comments. Really appreciate everyone joining and being part of the conversation. And thank you, Karen, so much for stopping by. And we'll see everybody later. Take care. Bye.
Bye.